She was a mistake, the Alpha King said. By dawn, he was searching the empty Luna wing. The morning Mara Voss arrived at the capital, it was raining. Not the soft kind, the kind that means business, the kind that soaks through a good coat in 4 minutes flat and makes the whole world smell like wet stone and old regret. She stood outside the palace gates with her one bag, her best boots, and the look on her face that her mother used to call the right then look. The one that meant, this is happening. I did not choose it, but here we are, right then. A guard opened the side gate for her. Not the main one, not the tall iron doors with the wolf heads forged into the bars. The side gate. The one deliveries came through, the one the kitchen staff used. He didn't apologize for it. He just opened it and gestured with his chin, and Mara walked through because there was no version of this morning where she didn't. She had been sent. That was the word the council used. Sent. Not presented, not offered, not chosen. Sent. The way you send a letter, the way you send a problem from one desk to another and hope the next desk figures it out for you. Mara's pack had 700 wolves and a debt they couldn't pay, and a peace agreement that had been unraveling since her father's disgrace 3 years ago. The borderland pack. The scrubby kind. The kind that raised children on stories about the capital and never quite believed the stories were true until they were standing inside them, soaked through their good coat, following a guard who smelled like boot polish and mild contempt. She counted steps. Old habit. Emergency exit geometry. 43 from the side gate to the main hall doors. Good to know. The throne room had a ceiling so high it made you feel like a furniture problem. Mara stood at the far end of it, which was not a short distance, and looked at 7 Alpha Kings seated along a curved stone table, and thought about how much the floor probably cost. Black marble, flecks of something that caught the light. Someone got up at 4 in the morning to mop this floor, and they did it without a single piece of gratitude coming their way, and yet here it was, clean, cold, and perfect, reflecting back 7 kings and 1 wet woman from the borderlands who was trying very hard not to think about how she was the only person in this room who had come through the delivery gate. Her pack's representative, Counselor Heth, 60 years old, deeply uncomfortable, had presented her case already. 7 packs, 1 peace treaty, 1 unclaimed female wolf from a borderland pack, being offered as a show of goodwill and political commitment. 1 last card, played by a council that had run out of better ones. She'd heard the speech from outside the door. It was not a flattering speech. The 7 kings had been politely unmoved by it. She could tell from their silence. Not hostile silence, just the silence of men who had heard many speeches and rated this one somewhere in the lower middle. And then she walked in, and 7 pairs of eyes moved to her. 6 of them assessed. 1 of them, the one at the center, the one in the stone chair that was wider than the others and made of something older, looked at the window. King Caius Drevith, 28 years old, Alpha King of the Capital Territory and 5 surrounding regions. The one who had 3 wars attributed to him and 0 confirmed weaknesses in any public record. The one whose silence in council meetings reportedly cost advisors sleep. He was looking at the window. There was nothing interesting outside the window, just the rain she'd come through. His advisor leaned in, said something low. Caius's eyes moved, finally, and landed on her with the specific quality of attention you give a smudge on a document before you sign it anyway. Present, not engaged. He said, very clearly, into the marble room, she was a mistake, not quietly, not cruelly. The way you say, it will rain today. The way you say the third option doesn't work, simply, factually. A statement about a category of thing. The room absorbed it. Counselor Heth went the color of old dishwater. Mara's hands were cold. She noticed this. She also noticed the floor, the flecks in the marble that caught the light. They were gold, she thought. Or something that wanted to be gold. Someone chose this floor and paid for it, and thought it looked important, and now she was standing on it being classified as a mistake, and the floor didn't care either way, and somehow that was the most honest thing in the room. She was 5 years old and her mother was leaving. She was 17 and her name was called at the marking ceremony, and no one stepped forward. She was here, now, in this room, being looked at like a form filed incorrectly. Right then, she dipped her head, controlled, the exact angle of neutral respect. "Of course," she said, and walked out. The good coat didn't wrinkle. The Luna Wing was on the east side of the palace. The small man who led her there, the functionary, Pell, he gave his name like an apology, had a walk that was all elbows and nervous energy, and he explained 3 times that the council required the Luna Wing to be prepared, regardless of the king's statement, because protocol was protocol, and the king's word was law, but so was the standing order of the Joint Summit Council, and the 2 things existed, as he put it, in parallel streams. "That's a diplomatic way of saying no one knows what happens next," Mara said. Pell's elbows got more anxious. "The council will deliberate." Right then, the Luna Wing smelled like beeswax and old fire and something floral that had been defunct for probably a decade. A scent that belonged to whoever had lived here before, some other woman, sent here before Mara, for reasons that also made sense on paper and fell apart in practice. Her room had high ceilings and long curtains and a window seat that looked over the east garden, and one wrong cushion. Everything in the room was cream. The walls, the covers, the rug, the curtains, cream, intentional, peaceful, and on the window seat, one cushion, red, not dark red, not burgundy, not even a red that was trying to be cream, red, the color of a warning light, or a bad idea. Someone had put it there, made that decision, and no one had ever undone it. Mara set her bag down by the door, not unpacking, never unpacking first, old habit from the years her family moved every time trouble got too loud, and went directly to the window seat, sat on the wrong cushion. It was the most comfortable thing in the room. She looked out at the rain on the east garden. Stone paths, low hedges shaped like waves, a fountain that was off for the season. Everything very controlled, very deliberate. The kind of garden that got maintained not because anyone loved it, but because letting it go would say something. From somewhere in the east wing, not far enough away, she heard a wolf call, low, slow, methodical. She knew that frequency. She'd grown up on the border, which meant she'd grown up listening to every kind of territory sound and learning what each one meant before she learned to read. That particular call, deep, evenly paced, slightly too controlled, was a dominant male walking his boundaries before sleep, marking them in sound because he'd already marked them in every other way that mattered. That was Caius. She did not react. She retucked the wrong cushion, then did it again, then looked at her hands and realized what she was doing and stopped. The rain kept going. She didn't unpack. Dinner was sent to her on a tray. It was enormous. More food than one person ate. Either the kitchen didn't know how to scale down a Luna Wing dinner service, or someone in that kitchen had decided to be kind in the only way available to them, which was volume. She ate the bread, left the eggs. She hadn't eaten eggs since she was 14, for reasons that were exactly 2 words long and belonged to no conversation she was having tonight or any other night. Somewhere below, 7 kings were at a dinner table. She was not curious about this. She told herself this 3 times, which was how she knew she was lying. There was a book on the windowsill. Spine cracked the way only a frequently read book gets, the kind of crack that's built up over years of the same hands opening it at the same pages. The corners were folded, not tidily, with the careless confidence of someone who had never worried about ruining a book because it was their book and they'd buy another one if they felt like it. On Pack Law and Contested Claims, Volume 4. She picked it up. 4 hours passed. She did not notice. She dog-eared 43 pages, specific ones. The ones on territorial rights, on summit obligations, on the legal definition of a contested claim, and the exact procedural steps required to invoke one. Old language. The kind written by people who had been very careful about words, because the wrong word in a law could end a pack. At some point the rain stopped. She kept reading. By midnight the fire in the room had dropped to embers, and she had the book open across her knees and was writing small notes in the margins. In pencil, light, the kind she could erase, the kind that said I was here but not permanently, and she felt, for the first time since the morning, like herself. That was the thing about law. It had no opinion about her. It just said, here are the rules, here is what applies, here is what has power, and what doesn't. Law didn't look at her through the delivery gate. It didn't call her a mistake and look back at the rain. It just sat on the page and waited to be understood. She understood it. Saints and wolves alike, she was good at it. Done. 3 in the morning. She went for water. The palace at 3 was not as sleeping as it looked. She passed 2 guards who clocked her and said nothing. She was Luna Wing, which meant she had corridor access, which meant they watched and let her through. She passed a cat sitting in a pool of moonlight on a windowsill, deeply unbothered by everything, including her. She passed a side hallway where someone had left a lantern burning on a hook, and the flame was doing something complicated in the draft from the window. She found the water room, small, stone, a shelf of clay cups and a cold water jug, and filled a cup and drank it standing up because she was cold and the water was colder and she wanted to be done with it. And then she turned around to go back. And at the end of the corridor she had come from, the long one, the east corridor, the one she had specifically chosen because it was the less traveled one, there was a man, not patrolling, just standing, the way you stand somewhere when you didn't mean to go there and arrived anyway. The way a person ends up at the window again, in the middle of the night, looking at nothing, and doesn't know yet that they've done it for a reason. She knew who it was, Caius, and she said, too loud, to herself, the way she said things when she forgot there were other people in the world. Right then, he turned, and she thought, saints and wolves alike. He is very tall in low light. Not tall the way people described kings as tall, which was always really just describing power wearing a body. Actually tall, load-bearing, the kind of tall that suggested the ceiling was optional. He was in plain clothes, no summit costume, no official performance, just dark fabric and no expression and eyes that were doing something more than looking at her. She had seen him in the throne room. She had seen the window looking, the smudge assessment, the statement delivered like weather. This was different. She did not know what it was different toward. She should have gone back. She had water. The cup was in her hand. She was tired and cold, and the fire in her room was still slightly alive, and there was no version of this hallway that needed her in it. She took 3 steps closer. His eyes moved to the book under her arm. Pack Law, Volume 4. That's mine, he said. His voice was, it was load-bearing, like the rest of him, the kind of voice that said a thing once and relied on the thing being true. It was on the windowsill, she said, in the Luna Wing, which is where I am. So it wasn't yours. It was there. Something happened in his face. Not a lot. The smallest possible movement in the area around his eyes. She couldn't name it. She filed it, mentally, in the same way she filed emergency exit distances and wrong cushion colors, and decided not to try. You dog-eared it, he said. Not a question. He'd seen the corners. 43 pages, she said. Saints and wolves alike, I'm sorry. Is this the part where you repeat the mistake announcement? I can pre-agree if it saves time. Silence. The kind of silence that had weight. He looked at her the way she was, apparently incapable of looking at him. Like she was a specific thing, not a category. Like there was information here that was worth the gathering. It was deeply inconvenient. You read law, he said. I was bored. Volume 4 specifically. It was the one on the windowsill. Volume 4 covers contested claim procedures. She looked at him. He looked back. The corridor was cold, and the lantern at the far end was still doing its complicated thing in the draft, and neither of them said anything else. And then she turned and walked back the way she came, and she didn't look behind her, and she heard, from the direction she had left him, nothing. No footsteps following, just the sound of someone standing still in a corridor they didn't need to be in. So, she woke up at 6, lay on her back staring at the cream ceiling for 3 minutes. Got up, put on the good coat, packed her bag. Not quickly. With the same care she'd packed it in the borderlands 2 days ago, when Counselor Heth had knocked on her door at dawn with his hat in his hands and the look of a man delivering news he'd been rehearsing and still hadn't found the right version of. She packed the way she always packed, the things that could be replaced at the bottom, the things that couldn't at the top, the book. And she stopped. The book. She looked at it. The cracked spine, the 43 dog-eared pages. She put it in her bag, then took it out, set it on the window seat, on the wrong red cushion, where it had been. Right then, the breakfast tray had been left at some point in the early morning. She hadn't heard anyone come in, which meant she'd slept harder than she'd meant to, which was what 3 a.m. law study in a cold room did to a person. Eggs. Again. A small war of a decision. She left them, drank the tea, stood at the window looking at the east garden, which in morning light looked exactly as controlled as it had in rain, and thought about 17-step stairwells and departure geometry and the specific quality of a man's attention in low light. She stopped thinking about it. Pell knocked at 8. He looked worse than yesterday, which was a considerable achievement. The king, he said, has requested a delay in proceedings. She waited. He did not specify the reason. Pell said. His hands were doing their nervous thing. The council will reconvene at 10. You are. The request is to remain available. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that he started to sweat. Fine, she said. Pell left. She sat on the wrong cushion, looked at the book, looked at it for a long time. This is what was seen by 3 people that morning between 5 and 7 a.m., reported separately and never in the same room. The East Corridor guard, a woman named Fenn, 12 years on duty, seen everything twice, saw the king walk the East Corridor at 5:13 in the morning, not his usual patrol route. He walked it at speed that wasn't urgent and wasn't casual, the speed of a person who is going somewhere they haven't decided to go to yet. He went as far as the end of the corridor, stopped, turned around, left. The morning maid for the Luna Wing, girl 16, first month in the palace, still startled by everything, saw the king stop outside the Luna Wing door at 5:40. Stand there. Open the door. The door was not locked. She said this twice in the telling. It was not locked. He opened it, stood in the doorway, closed it. She heard his footsteps retreat, then come back, open the door again. This time he leaned in far enough that the maid, who was in the corner changing linens and hoping not to be seen, could see him clearly. He was looking at the window seat, not at anything specific, just that area, the window seat. Then he left. Pell, the functionary, small man, nervous hands, had been awake since 4, worrying about the morning. Saw the king arrive in the council chamber at 6:55 a.m., 2 hours before the session. Alone, sat at the stone table, not at his chair, somewhere in the middle. He had a book with him. Pell reported this with the careful neutrality of a man writing something down for his own later peace of mind. The book was not identified, but Pell had seen the king's library and the king's reading habits for 3 years, and had never once seen him bring a book to an empty council chamber at 6:55 in the morning. He recorded it, filed it under inexplicable, moved on. The council chamber at 10 was the kind of room that told you immediately who was in charge, not through decoration. The room itself wasn't decorated. Stone table, stone chairs, a window at the far end that faced the same east garden Mara had been looking at for 2 days now. The controlled one, the one someone maintained out of obligation. It told you who was in charge by the way the air moved when Caius sat down. Or didn't move. The 7 kings filed in, the 6 council representatives. Councillor Heth, still the color of old dishwater, seated along the side wall with 3 other packed delegates. Mara was not in the room. She had not been summoned to the room. She was in the Luna Wing, sitting on the wrong cushion, and Pell had told her he would come with the result. She was reading the book again. She had tried not to. She'd sat for 20 minutes with her hands in her lap and her bag packed and her coat on, thinking, this is not my business. The law is not my tool here. I am not the one making the decision. I was sent. I will go or I will stay, and neither of those things requires me to understand the procedural architecture of contested claims. Then she picked up the book. The session ran 40 minutes. Pell told her this later, with the thoroughness of a man who processed anxiety through detail. The other 6 kings each spoke. About the treaty, The borderland pact situation, the precedent of a refusal, the implications for the summit agreement. Long speeches or short ones, but all of them circling the same thing. What does the king's statement from yesterday mean, legally and politically, and what comes next? Caius let them finish. Then he said, 2 words, contested claim. The room understood it before the words finished landing. Contested claim. Pack Law, Volume 4. The procedure invoked when a presented party had not been formally and legally rejected through the proper channels, which required a written record, a pack council acknowledgement, a specified waiting period. A verbal statement, she was a mistake, however clearly delivered in a marble room full of witnesses, did not legally constitute a formal rejection under the terms of the joint summit agreement. Caius had apparently read the same 43 pages, or he'd written notes in the margins of them years ago, or both. The council voted, unanimously, because what else could they do? Mara stayed, not because he had chosen her, he had not chosen her, explicitly, legally, procedurally had not chosen her. What he had done was invoke a process that meant she had not been formally unchosen, and that was an entirely different thing. And she understood the difference because she had spent most of the last 12 hours inside a cracked spine book that laid it out in exhaustive and somewhat beautiful detail. Pell came to the Luna Wing at 11:20, knocked, said, "Contested claim has been invoked. You are to remain in the Luna Wing pending the required procedural review period. That period is, by law, 30 days. Then he looked at the floor, because he was a decent man trying to deliver news that he did not have a framework for. "Thank you," Mara said. He left. She sat with it. 30 days. She put the bag down, not unpacking, just not by the door. She went back to the window seat, sat on the wrong cushion, picked up the book, and then stopped, put the book down, and looked at the east garden for a long time, the stone paths, the low hedges shaped like waves, the fountain still off for the season, and she thought, he read those pages. She tucked the thought away, small and useful, like a 17-step stairwell distance, like emergency exit geometry. Something you note and don't examine too closely, because if you examine it, you have to decide what it means, and she was not ready to decide what it meant. Not today, not yet. What came next was not a beginning, exactly. Beginnings have a warmth to them, a sense of arrival. This was not that. This was more like 2 people standing in the same building, aware of each other in the way you're aware of a sound you can't quite place. Not alarming, not comfortable, just present, occupying the same walls. She had 30 days. He had 30 days of a process he had put in motion. The palace staff made no assumptions. The council made no announcements. The other kings left over the next 3 days, and the summit was done, and the Borderland Pact's debt was in formal review, and Councillor Heth went home looking 5 years older and probably spent the journey trying to figure out what he was going to tell the Pact Council. Mara was left. She established a routine, not because she was comfortable, because routine was her way of making walls, something to put between herself and the fact that she was in a strange place, with no clear outcome, and a man 2 corridors over who had called her a mistake and then read all her dog ears. Morning, the East Garden, if it wasn't raining, not because she loved gardens, because the paths were measured and she could walk them and count and not think. Midday, the library. She had asked Pell, who had looked startled and pleased, and he had given her access to the South Reading Room, not the private library, not the King's Library, the South Reading Room, which was large and full and smelled like the right kind of dust. She took books, returned them, took more. The staff watched her with the careful neutrality of people waiting to understand what category she was. Evening, the window seat. Always the window seat. Always the wrong cushion. She had stopped retucking it. It was exactly where it was, and that was where she sat. She did not see Caius, not the first 4 days. She was aware of him the way you're aware of a weather system. Not visible. Definitely there. On the 5th day she was in the South Reading Room when the door opened. She didn't look up. Footsteps. Not Pell's elbows and apology walk. Not a guard's flat tread. Something else. The controlled kind. The kind that didn't make sound because making sound was optional and the person had decided against it. She turned a page. A book was set on the table across from her. She looked up. Caius sat down. He had a different volume of Pack Law. Volume 2. He opened it without looking at her. Started reading. She looked at him for 3 seconds. He didn't react. She went back to her book. They sat in the south reading room for 2 hours and 40 minutes and said exactly nothing. It was, inexplicably, not a bad 2 hours and 40 minutes. The second time was the garden. She was on her morning walk, 4th loop, not thinking about anything, lying, when he appeared on the far side of the east path. He was not in official dress. He walked the way he did everything, like it had been decided, and was now simply happening, unhurried. Exact. She kept walking. He kept walking. The paths converged at the fountain. They arrived at roughly the same time. She stopped. He stopped. The fountain was still off. Stone bowl, dry interior, 3 decorative wolves mid-pour and doing nothing. "It's dry," she said, immediately regretted it. Observed the fountain was dry to a man who lived here. "November," he said. "Right." A pause. "They turn it off in November," he said, not explaining, just completing the information. "When do they turn it back on?" "March." She nodded. She thought about what a very short conversation this was. She thought about how there was probably a version of the next 30 seconds where they walked away from this fountain, and this became nothing, a convergence at a dry stone basin. Noted, filed, irrelevant. "The procedural review," he said. She went very still. "It's not a formality," he said. He was looking at the dry fountain. "Not at her. I want you to know that. It's not. I didn't invoke it to stall. I know what contested claim means," she said. "I know you do." She looked at him. "Volume 4, he said. "Volume 4, she said. And then neither of them said anything else, and it was the kind of silence that had a shape to it. Not empty, not comfortable, something in between, the kind of silence that happens when 2 people are holding the same information and have not yet agreed what to do with it. She walked back to the Luna wing. She did not run. This was something she noted, because her body's first instinct had been to run. She did not. She walked, counted steps, and sat on the wrong cushion and looked at her hands. And then anger came, sweet and familiar. She breathed it in the way you breathe in something that has never once let you down. She was not going to be soft about this. She was not going to make the mistake of reading 30 Days of Proximity as meaning. She had been sent here. He had called her a mistake. He had invoked a procedure that was either about her or about the law or about something she didn't have enough information to understand yet, and she was not. Saints and wolves alike, she was absolutely not going to let herself be surprised. She had been surprised before. At 17, in front of everyone. Once was enough. Wing! The days moved. Not quickly, not slowly, with the particular pace of things that are being waited out. They found, without discussing finding it, a rhythm. Reading room in the afternoons if he came. Garden in the mornings. Parallel paths. Converging sometimes at the fountain. Short exchanges. Law, mostly. The Summit Treaty and its terms, which she had read and he had lived. The Borderland Pact's history, which she had lived and he had only read. She said something sharp on the 8th day and waited for the room to change. It didn't. He answered as if she'd said something measured. This was, she did not have a word for it. Disorienting, like stepping somewhere expecting to fall and finding floor. On the 12th day she brought volume 3, set it on the table across from him. He looked at it. "It covers the jurisdiction disputes," she said, "from the Eastern annexation period. I think there's an argument in here for the Borderland Pact's outstanding claim that no one has run yet." He was quiet for a moment. "Show me," he said. They stayed until the south reading room's light went bad, and a staff member came in to light the wall sconces and did not comment, diplomatically, on the fact that the king and the contested Luna were sitting on the same side of a table with 3 open books between them and enough margin notes to fill a 4th. She did not let herself think about what it meant. She was very good at not thinking about what things meant. She had been practicing since she was 5 years old. There was a conversation on the 15th day that she would think about later. It started, as their conversations often did, sideways. She was looking for a specific volume, something on treaty termination clauses, very dry, very specific, and the South Reading Room didn't have it on the shelves. She mentioned this out loud without thinking, to herself, the way she talked when she forgot she wasn't alone. North Wing, he said, without looking up from his own reading. Third shelf from the left. Brown spine, gold lettering, but the lettering has worn off the first two words, so it looks like it's titled Provisions Applicable to. She stood there. You know where every book in this palace is, she said. Not everyone. How many? He looked up, considered. Most of them. I had a lot of time as a child to walk these rooms. The library was the safest place in the palace. Rooms that are mostly books are difficult for certain kinds of trouble to navigate. She looked at him. He looked back. He had not meant to say that. She could tell. It was the first time she'd seen his expression catch on something before settling. A half second of, I just told someone a thing, followed by the decision to let it stand. The borderlands had a lot of open ground, she said, which sounds nicer than it was. Open ground is good for running, but it doesn't give you anywhere to be invisible. He was quiet. I was very good at running, she said. Saints and wolves alike. I was the fastest thing in the pack at 12. Because when you don't have walls to get lost in, you learn legs instead. She hadn't meant to say that either. She went to the north wing to find the book. Brown spine, gold lettering worn to nothing except the words, Provisions Applicable to, exactly where he said. She stood there for a moment with it in her hands and thought about a boy who learned a palace the way she had learned to run, because it was what the particular shape of his danger required, and felt something move in her chest that she immediately recategorized as awareness of the cold in the north wing and moved on. On the 20th day, he said, Why law? She was returning a book to its shelf. Didn't look at him. Because it's the only thing that doesn't have an opinion, she said. About what? She put the book on the shelf. Turned around. He was watching her with the look she still didn't have a name for. The specific one. The one that treated her like a thing worth knowing. About whether I should be here, she said. It was the most honest thing she had said since arriving. She was surprised she said it. She was more surprised that it didn't feel like falling. He was quiet for a moment, then. The law brought you here, he said. The law kept me here, she said. That's different. He looked at her. Is it? He said. Not a question. She went back to the window seat that evening and sat on the wrong cushion and didn't pick up any book and didn't look at the garden and just sat with the 4 words, Is it? Is it? And felt them do something she didn't have a name for either. She did not cry. She was not a person who cried in front of witnesses. She was the only one in the room. She still didn't. The thing about the palace staff was this. They noticed everything and said nothing. Mara had grown up in a borderland pack that ran on gossip the way a fire runs on dry wood. Fast, indiscriminate, consuming. Someone sneezed in the east quarter, and by dinner time the west quarter knew the exact trajectory of it. Palace staff were different. They had a code, possibly several codes. She had been here 3 weeks, and she knew their routes and their timing, and their small expressions the way she knew the layout of the corridors. And what she knew was, they saw the reading room. They saw the garden paths. They saw a king who walked the east corridor at hours he did not used to walk it, and they kept every single thing they saw. The maid who did her room, a woman named Bira, older, hands that moved like they'd done this work for 30 years because they had, started leaving the tea later. When Mara stayed up past midnight with a book, the tea appeared at 11 instead of 9. Mara had not asked for this. She had not mentioned her reading hours to anyone. Bira just knew. And one morning, when Mara came back from the garden to find the breakfast tray, there were no eggs on it. She looked at the tray. Bread, fruit, cheese, no eggs. She had never once told anyone about the eggs. She ate the bread and the fruit, and sat on the wrong cushion, and thought about what it meant to be in a place long enough for the place to start accommodating the shape of you. Even the small shapes. Even the ones you'd never announced. It was, she thought, a very quiet kind of being seen. Mara, who had been looked at plenty and seen rarely, did not know what to do with a quiet kind. She retucked the cushion, then straightened it again, moved on, 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 on. On the 28th day, Pell came with a document. He stood in the doorway with the document held in front of him like a shield and said, "The procedural review is complete. The council requires a response from the king by the 30th day. I wanted to let you know, before, so that you have." He didn't finish the sentence. "Time to pack," she said. He looked pained. "I wasn't going to say that." "I know," she said. "I was saying it so you didn't have to." He left. She sat on the cushion, looked at the book, looked at the garden, looked at her bag, which was where she'd put it on day 5, not by the door, not unpacked, somewhere in between. Still packed, always packed, old habit. She thought about 30 days of parallel paths and converging fountains, and the specific quality of a man reading law in the same room as her without requiring her to be anything other than someone who read law. She thought about 17, and the marking ceremony, and the way the crowd went quiet. She thought about Bira, and the eggs and the tea at 11. She thought about a boy who learned a palace the way she had learned to run. She thought about the wrong cushion, the way it had been there before she arrived, and would be there after she left, and did not have an opinion about either state of affairs. Right then, she started to pack more carefully, not dramatically, just the things that couldn't be replaced going to the top. On the 29th day he came to the Luna wing. Not to the door. Pell relayed the message. The king was in the East Garden, and it was phrased as an inquiry, Pell said, which was notable given that inquiries were not in the king's documented behavioral range. If she wanted to walk, she put down the things she was holding, looked at the garden from the window. He was there, on the far side, standing at the fountain, which was still dry, was still 3 wolves mid-pour going nowhere. She went down, 43 steps from the Luna wing to the East Garden door. She had counted this 3 weeks ago, and had not meant to remember it, and had remembered it anyway. He heard her coming, turned when she was 10 steps out. She stopped at the fountain. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. "The council needs an answer." "I know." She looked at the dry fountain, at the 3 wolves, thought about the person who had designed them, who had probably had opinions about them, who had made decisions about the angle of the pour and the curve of the stone, and all of it was now just held still in cold weather, not going anywhere, waiting for March. "I need you to understand something," he said. She waited. "What I said. In the throne room. I said it before I knew. I looked up and I saw. And what I said and He stopped, started again. "I was wrong." She thought about the marble floor, the gold trying flecks. "I heard you say it," she said. "I know. In front of everyone. I know." He said it like he'd been carrying it. Not guiltily, practically, like a weight he'd acknowledged and had no plan to put down. She looked at him. He looked back. "I'm not easy," she said. "I read law at midnight, and I don't eat eggs, and I have strong opinions about load-bearing furniture, and I'm from the borderlands, which means I grew up assuming everything ends eventually, and that is not a simple thing to work with." "I read law at midnight too," he said. She almost smiled. "Almost? That's not an answer," she said. "No," he said, "but I have one, if you're willing to hear it." She looked at the fountain, looked at him. "The cushion in my room is the wrong color," she said. He blinked, exactly once. "What?" "The window seat. It's red. Everything else is cream. Someone put it there, and no one ever fixed it." She paused. "I like it. I've been sitting on it for 29 days. I just think you should know that about me, that I will sit on the wrong cushion every time, and probably not mention it until it matters." He was quiet for a moment. "The cushion was mine," he said. "I put it there 8 years ago. It was cold, and the cream ones weren't comfortable, and I was reading in that room because the library was being repainted, and I wanted somewhere to sit, and someone told me to take any cushion from the storage room, and I took the red one." He paused. "I forgot I left it." She stared at him. Saints and wolves alike, she said. He almost smiled. Almost. Your answer, she said. My answer, he said, is that I invoked a 30-day process on the second day of knowing you, and I spent most of it in the South Reading Room, and I turned the fountain back on this morning. It's March in 4 months. I didn't want to wait. She looked at the fountain. It was dry, but she could hear it now, a low sound somewhere in the basin, the water moving, not flowing yet, just arriving. She looked at it for a long time, not running yet, getting there. Mara did not unpack her bag that night. She moved it from the in-between place to the wardrobe, left it there, closed the door, went to the window seat and sat on the wrong cushion and looked at the east garden and thought, 30 days, one wrong cushion, Volume 4, Contested Claims, 3 wolves going nowhere in a dry fountain that was currently, quietly, filling. The anger came, she breathed it in, but it sat differently now, less like a wall, more like, she didn't have a word for it, like a hand in a pocket, something she kept because she'd always kept it, not because she needed it right this second. She thought about the marking ceremony, the crowd going quiet. 17 years old and standing in the middle of a silence that felt like the rest of her life. She thought about the delivery gate. She thought about the way the throne room had sounded when he said mistake, marble, echo, 47 witnesses. She thought about the reading room, 2 hours and 40 minutes. Nothing said. She thought about the North Wing, a book whose spine had worn to almost nothing, a king who had once been a boy learning walls the way she had learned legs. She thought about Bira, and the tea, and the breakfast without eggs. She thought about the fountain, getting there. She did not think about what came next. She was not ready to think about what came next. What came next was 30 years of information she didn't have yet, and she was not a person who committed to information she didn't have. But she thought about March. She thought about water moving through stone. She thought about how the wrong cushion had been his, and how the wrong cushion was the most comfortable thing in the room, and how he had left it there for 8 years because he'd forgotten and she'd found it because she'd arrived, and how that was, she didn't have a word for it. She would need a word for it, eventually. But tonight she just sat on it, and looked out at the garden, and the lamp in the east corridor burned all night. On the 30th day, the council chamber received its answer. 2 words, same as always. Formal recognition. Pack Law, Volume 4. The procedure concluded. The claim resolved. Pell came to the Luna Wing at 9 in the morning. He knocked, he waited, he knocked again. She opened the door. She was in plain clothes. Not the good coat, something simpler, the kind of thing you wear when you've stopped deciding whether to perform. Pell opened his mouth. I know, she said. He looked at her, then at the room behind her, at the bag, not by the door, not visible, at the window seat, where the wrong cushion sat exactly where it always sat. He exhaled. Breakfast, he said, will be in the east dining room today. First time that room's been used in, I'll have to check the records actually. Quite some time. She looked at him. Will there be eggs, she said. Pell almost smiled. The specific smile of a man who had been paying very close attention for 30 days, and was pleased about something he would never directly acknowledge. I will personally ensure there are not, he said. She walked with him down the corridor, 43 steps from the Luna Wing to the main hall. She counted them. Old habit. But this time, she noted, she was counting towards something rather than to it. The difference was small. She kept it.